Okay. Um, we're a little rushed, but that's okay. I want to do a couple things that we haven't done before and a couple things that we've talked about and have done before, but see how it's done in a mix. Primarily, first thing, let's look at the drums. So I'm more or less happy with my curve, the balance of my drums, my processing choices. I have taken off my gates on the kick and snare, but I have it on the toms. And what I'm going to do is create what's called a sub mix. And I'm going to do that by creating a stereo aux input track. Calling it drum sub. I am going to change the input to a bus of my drum sub. And I'm going to highlight all of my drum tracks and hitting Option and Shift. I'm going to change their outputs. Okay, so the actual outputs that would be going to the main, the master fader and our headphones, I'm going to change that to 7 and 8. All right. So when I do that, nothing actually changes. Actually, it didn't change because I hit the wrong buttons. Now it's done all my highlighted tracks. So what that's doing is, and I can do it this way, is it is routing all of my drums through the aux track. So now that offers us a couple things, and I'm going to show you an example of a VCA that doesn't pass audio. So the drum sub, this aux input track, does pass audio, but it also allows me simply to raise or lower the volume of the entire drum kit on one fader. I could do that in a group. I could do that in a VCA. However, by having audio actually passing through the channel, which they do not in VCAs, I can add an EQ on the overall drum bus. And I could say, I'd like to overall add a little bit. Okay. So I could do EQ. I could do compression, but I'm not going to do compression because the second thing that I want to explain, but basically this allows me still to manage individual drum track volumes. So I get the best of both worlds in some way. I can control the overall volume on one channel, but I can also go and tweak individual sounds as needed. The next thing I want to do for the drums is what's called parallel compression, and this is definitely new for us. I'm going to call this drum crush. The crush comes from the fact that we're going to be hitting the drums pretty hard with compression. And some people, and I included, do this differently from time to time. I don't always send all of the drums, but I'm in this instance just to keep it simple. So I have chosen yet another bus for my drum crush. This time, what I'm going to do is I am going to send it. Oh, there's my spinning wheel. So instead of changing the outputs, I'm going to send on this bus 7 and 8. How is 9 and 10 used? I don't know. All right. And I am going to do it more or less at 0 at unity gain. Now, I've talked with a bunch of you while we were in the studio about using this pre button, which would mean that it would ignore the fader or the mutes. If I were to hit pre fader means that that signal is leaving on this bus, or it's unrelated to the signal that or the level of your fader. When it's not in pre, then this volume curve kind of is reflected in what is sent through the bus. So with all of these 7 and 8 fade buses at 0, the sends at 0, the drum crush is getting exactly what's here. All right, so why did I do that to 7 and 8? It's supposed to be, I'm kind of dumb. But you knew that already. That's what 9 and 10, it's supposed to be 9 and 10. Okay, so everything's the same, except now I actually see it here. Okay, so right now, all that's getting to the drum crush aux input is the drum set again. Basically exactly what the drum sub is doing. But what we're going to do is, I'm going to leave that at 0 actually. I'm going to insert a compressor on here. And I'll use the BF76 for this. Okay, and I want pretty heavy compression. Medium attack. Go to 8 to 1. Okay, and this is something that we're going to mix into taste. Now, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time dialing in the perfect parameters or settings. Now, what is this doing? It is compressing the overall signal and allowing kind of the room and just the guts of the drum kit to come through. So you're going to hear, I always find, and I already could hear it, a lot more kick, a lot more cymbal. Okay, so that allows us to get, quite a bit more power out of our drum kit. Okay, now taking the idea of the drum sub, I want to talk about how I'm going to manage the saxophones, or the sax and the trombone, the horns. So I am highlighting all of them. I'm going to hit Command G to bring up a group, and I'm going to call it horns. I'm going to make a new track, which is going to be a VCA track. As soon as I hit this, you'll see that mono and stereo disappear because it's really unrelated. It does not pass audio. So it is simply a controller. I always forget VCA. Is it voltage control? But anyways, so now I have this track here, and I'm going to come up to group where it says no group, and I'm going to change, or I'm going to choose horns. So now when I raise my fader, I have control over all of the horns that are in that group. What's cool, what's different about this between the aux input sub is that no audio goes through this. I can't add any additional processing, anything like that. But I still have individual control over the horns, which is kind of cool. And then once I do like it, I'm allowed to, raise the fader as I want to if I need more or less of the horn section. I have decided to kind of give more prevalence to the room mics on the horns. Okay, so there's kind of the horns. I'm not going to be able to get everything that I want to get in here. Couple other tricks that I do think are interesting. That I always talk about having an overall reverb, but I also often use individual reverbs depending on the source. So for the guitars, I do have individual reverbs. I am not putting them directly on the track. This is a unique, I think a fairly unique use case for saying don't do it. I mean, don't put it directly on the track. So what I've done is I have bussed the guitar over to a mono aux input track, and I've inserted for the left side guitar the spring reverb. And if you notice, I have the guitar panned fairly hard to the left, and I have the reverb panned not quite as hard, but pretty hard to the right. So if you can hear that, it kind of gives us more space. It brings some width to the sound. And I did the opposite because the right side guitar, so I'm panning that guitar's reverb to the left. For this one, I just used a small, fairly 1.1 second on with deverb. All right, and that way I think it is kind of cool. It brings some depth. It gives you some ear candy. You hear it during the solo, for example. When that guitar is going, you hear like a little bit of a reflection and that reverb coming off to the right. Okay, so little panned reverb trick. And what is the last thing that I'm going to talk about? Overall reverb, because I really do have, I still do have an overall reverb. I have deverb in here. I have it at fairly short, 2.2 seconds. I have the horns routed to it, quite heavy on the horns in my opinion. And I am going to send some piano because I hadn't yet. One thing about the piano that I think is important that I hadn't gotten a chance to get to is the pianist or the piano player or what have you changed piano sounds mid-recording. So this is a very bell-heavy electric piano, and then he went to the piano. So I thought it was important to cut where the piano engaged and put it on its own track because I wanted to handle the EQ of these two sounds differently. So, for example, on the E piano, I wanted to cut some mid-range and raise some overall brightness. Okay, to open it up a little bit. I probably hit the bell a little bit more than I'd like, but on the piano, I found it lacking a lot in the low end. Okay, so I really did quite a heavy boost of 7 dB in the low end of the piano, around 100 hertz. Pretty wide, actually, bandwidth as well, at 0.65 Q. Last thing, if I can ever give it up, I did a little bit of volume, a little bit of panning automation, because I found it pretty awkward that the guitar is on the left during its solo. A little unhappy about this. I'll go back and check it out. Now that I have the sub, I just need to come, because I'm pretty sure it was in the drums. Okay. You know, there's still more that I would like to do, but I think that's about it. You know, again, in the overall reverb, I did send the drums to it. I did send some of the guitar. I did, even though they have their own reverb. I also kind of wanted them in the room with the band. That is kind of what we do. And then, of course, the piano and the horns. And the horns got it pretty heavy. Let's get to our last little spot of everybody. Bringing the guitar back because it goes back to a no, it really doesn't. Okay, I'm gonna leave it. All right, I am not going to put anything on the master bus right now. I am going to bounce this out and then maybe do a quick mastering video-ish, but not really. I always love when there's little things in there like that was better. All right, so I'm actually just going to bounce it like this. I am going to make, for mastering purposes, I'm going to do it at full fidelity. I'm going to leave it at 2448 because that's what these files are. We're not going to have any conversion that we need to deal with. Okay, so there we go.